Ford 1.6 titanium fault codes engine CodeSHDA, 1596 cc. 4 SIL, 2008 Petrol. The described problem with the brake pedal is serious and requires a very specific diagnosis and maintenance plan because brakes are directly related to safety, and because the fact that the brake pedal occasionally sinks deeper indicates a temporary loss of pressure in the braking system. Even though the brakes have been renewed all around, the master brake cylinder has been replaced. The system has been bled several times, and no error codes or leaks are visible, and the phenomenon continues to occur approximately once a week or once every 2 weeks, after which it feels normal again after pressing the brake pedal again. This car is a small petrol car with a 1.4-liter 16-valve petrol engine with the internal engine designation CGG, a 4-cylinder that belongs to an engine series that was used from approximately the beginning of 2009 to approximately the end of 2016 in various small models with comparable technology. And a lot of information and experiences can be found on the internet about these engine types and models, where it is generally known that the petrol engines are often reasonably reliable, but that there are points of attention, including the timing belt, the cooling system, and in older years of construction, the sensitivity to rust and, in some versions, electronic malfunctions, and that, just like in other cars, the braking systems are subject to wear and tear of brake pads, brake discs, brake lines, brake hoses, and parts of the power brake system. The specific problem of a brake pedal that occasionally sinks a few centimeters deeper than normal, while the brakes and master cylinder appear to be in good condition and no leaks are visible, can indicate a number of possible causes, such as an internal leak in the brake booster, a problem with the vacuum system that is responsible for the operation of the brake booster, a residual small air bubble in a part of the brake system that is difficult to bleed, a defect in an ABS hydraulic unit in which valves occasionally do not close properly or seep internally, or a problem with the seal in the new master brake cylinder itself, even though it has already been replaced, and therefore a structured diagnosis of the entire brake and vacuum system is necessary. The first step in the diagnosis plan is a test drive with an experienced mechanic, during which the problem is attempted to be reproduced with a diagnostic device connected that can show live data from the braking system, the ABS system, and the engine vacuum system, so that one can see whether, when the pedal sinks, any deviations can be seen in, for example, the vacuum values or the control of the ABS unit, and whether there are hidden error codes in the ABS system, even if no lights are on. The mechanic must then visually and mechanically check the entire braking system for micro leaks, for example in the brake lines, couplings, brake hoses, and brake calipers, by examining all connections with a strong lamp, and by looking under the car, and in the vicinity of the brake pedal and the master brake cylinder for minimal traces of moisture or rust around couplings that may indicate a small leak that does not drip immediately, but can lead to pedal sinking in the event of pressure loss. The vacuum system of the brake booster must then be checked by means of a vacuum meter and by manually testing the brake booster. For example, by pumping the brake pedal several times with the engine switched off, and then starting the engine to see how the pedal behaves and whether the booster builds up and maintains sufficient and stable vacuum, and by checking the vacuum hoses and any vacuum pump for leaks and cracks, because a small leak or a non-return valve that does not function properly can sometimes cause the brake pedal to feel different or move a little further. Sinks away. The ABS hydraulic unit must be investigated as a possible cause because it contains valves and internal circuits, so that in the event of a small internal leak or a valve that sometimes does not close properly, the brake pressure can temporarily disappear and the pedal can drop deeper without there being any external leakage and without an error code being immediately stored, especially if it only happens rarely. This can be tested by checking the brake pressure with a pressure gauge on the brake circuits when the pedal is pressed repeatedly, and by using the diagnostic device to control the ABS actuators in a test mode in which the valves of the ABS unit activate themselves briefly to see whether the behavior of the pedal changes. The tools for this diagnosis consist of a professional diagnostic computer that can communicate with the brand of brake and ABS systems, a vacuum meter for the brake booster, a brake pressure meter for the brake circuits, standard garage tools for dismantling parts, and if necessary, a tool to bleed the brake system again under pressure, and with care, such as a pressure bleeder so that air bubbles in the ABS unit or in the rear brake circuits can be removed. It is known that on some cars, a special procedure is required via the diagnostic device to activate the ABS unit during bleeding, so that air trapped there is released and can be drained together with the brake fluid. And if this is not done, air can still remain in the unit despite multiple bleedings, resulting in occasional pedal sinking. The brake components that may be involved in the problem in this story are the brake booster including vacuum system, the ABS hydraulic unit, and possibly a seal in the master cylinder or internal seals in brake calipers. Although the latter is less likely when the pedal only sinks after a longer period of time or under specific conditions, and when brakes are otherwise functioning well and no uneven braking or pulling is noticeable. In the repair plan, the order is first diagnosis, and only then possible replacement of parts such as vacuum hoses, brake booster, or ABS unit, and these are parts with considerable costs in terms of both labor hours and materials. About the general problems of these models and engines, it can be found on the internet that with petrol engines, such as the CGG 1.416 valves at higher mileage, well-known topics include wear on the timing belt and tension rollers, sometimes problems with ignition coils and spark plugs, which can cause the engine to run irregularly and deliver less power, rust formation on the chassis elsewhere around wheel arches and sills in older years of manufacture. In any case, electronics malfunctions in sensors and airbag systems, and that in the braking system general wear of brake discs, brake pads, hand brake mechanisms, and sometimes stuck brake calipers. Prevent. It also happens that brake lines rust after many years, especially in areas with a lot of road salt, and that brake fluid is not changed sufficiently often, which can cause internal moisture and corrosion. This type of small petrol car was produced from approximately the beginning of 2009 to approximately the end of 2017, with different engines including small 3-cylinder petrol engines, smaller diesel variants, and the 1.416 valve petrol engine. And when choosing between petrol and diesel, annual kilometers driven and usage profile play a role because diesel is often interesting for many long motorway journeys and high annual mileage, while petrol is more suitable for shorter journeys and fewer kilometers, and because modern diesel engines have more complex systems such as particulate filters and exhaust gas treatment systems that are maintenance sensitive for many short periods. Rides. Before purchasing a used car from this series, it is advisable to choose versions with a demonstrable maintenance history, regular oil and filter changes, timely replacement of the timing belt, and without serious rust, and to avoid models with known serious engine problems, such as certain small turbo diesels at high mileages that are poorly maintained. The maintenance costs of a minor maintenance service consist of changing the engine oil and oil filter and checks, and are usually in the order of several €100. For example, approximately 300 to 400 euros depending on the hourly rate and parts used, while a major service with the replacement of the air filter, fuel filter, cabin filter, and extensive checks, and sometimes changing brake fluid often amounts to around 500 to more than 800 euros, especially if additional work is involved such as spark plugs or brake parts. For every 10,000 kilometers to around 200,000 kilometers, this means that maintenance is required approximately every 15,000 kilometers or every year, whereby the time interval is decisive for lower mileage, and the mileage schedule is usually decisive for higher mileage. Maintenance-sensitive parts in these models are brakes, timing belt, control arms, track rods, stabilizer bars, exhaust parts, ignition coils, spark plugs, and if older, brake lines and rubbers in the suspension, while the lifespan of the starter motor, dynamo, and shock absorbers depends greatly on use, but is often somewhere between 100,000 and 250,000 kilometers. and it is wise to have these parts visually and functionally assessed during each maintenance visit, so that wear is seen in time and preventive replacement can be planned before a part fails at an inopportune moment. Preventive replacement of brake fluid is usually recommended every 2 to 3 years to prevent moisture accumulation and rust formation in the braking system, and also helps to ensure that internal seals and ABS units continue to function properly for longer, and can therefore help prevent problems such as unexpected pedal sinking. With the braking system, it is also important that brake pads and discs are replaced in time before they fall below the minimum thickness, and that brake hoses are periodically checked for dry cracks and swelling. The costs for brake pads and brake discs for a small car are often around several €100, including labor per axle, while brake hoses and brake lines can cost from several tens to hundreds of euros, depending on the situation. In terms of automatic transmission and gearboxes, manual versions and automatic or robotized gearboxes have been available, and when purchasing a used car in this class, it is often advisable to opt for a manual version, because it is usually less complex and maintenance-sensitive than some automatic or robotized systems that can develop problems with shifting and slipping with age and require expensive repairs or overhauls. With a used car, a full test drive with the engine cold and warm and testing all gears including reverse is preferable, and it is wise to pay attention to jerks when switching gears, noises, and slipping. For the engine, regular and timely changes of oil and filters with the correct specification, the use of good fuel and avoiding prolonged driving with fault lights on, or with clearly audible engine problems, are essential to prevent future damage even if an engine still seems to be running well, and that the cooling system is also important by maintaining the coolant level and checking the radiator and hoses periodically to avoid overheating. Combining these measures with careful driving behavior reduces the chance that expensive engine repairs will be necessary, and the car remains more reliable up to high mileage. The hourly wage at an independent garage is often lower than at a brand dealer, and in practice fluctuates between roughly 60 and €100 per hour at an independent workshop, and often slightly higher at a dealer where extra is paid for brand-specific knowledge and equipment. It can therefore be worthwhile to choose a reliable independent garage for standard maintenance and to use a dealer for complex brand-specific software problems or recalls. Finally, when choosing a year model and engine variant, it is wise to search on internet forums and experience sites for known problems of specific construction years from approximately the beginning of 2009 to construction years around 2025, and to give preference to versions with proven, reliable petrol engines without extreme tuning and without complex or notorious automatic transmissions, and to choose diesel variants only when a lot of long highway journeys are driven and the maintenance history of the particulate filter and exhaust gas system is good. By having an expert inspect it at the time of purchase, an extensive test drive, and a diagnostic readout, many problems can be detected in advance and expensive surprises can be prevented in the future, making the car more reliable and safer in terms of both engine and braking system.